And welcome back to another episode of the Because Money podcast. I'm Kyle Prevo, and as always, I'm joined by Jackson Middleton and Sandy Martin. Joining us today, we have the incomparable Cait Flanders from blondeonabudget.ca. Cait, amongst other notable feats, has paid off $28,000 in debt and has become the new Canadian minimalism expert after tossing out 75% of her stuff and embarking on a 2-year shopping ban. So welcome, Cait.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So my first thought is, sorry, go ahead.
No, incomparable. I like it.
I threw that word down.
Who would you compare to Cait Flanders? Nobody comes to mind.
That's awesome.
So my first question is, what spurred this whole paying down debt, and then sort of was it a gradual slide into minimalism, or was it like an epiphany? How did that happen?
Yeah, it's sort of funny because everyone assumes that I sort of like was maxed out with debt, and then I obviously started a shopping ban because I was in debt. I'm like, no, it actually came way after I was debt free and had absolutely nothing to do with that. So I was 25, just about to turn 26, and I realized I was maxed out with about just over $28,000 of debt, most of which was consumer. Like of that, only $4,000 was school. So 15,000 of it was a car loan. A couple of years before that, I basically just was someone who always spent more than I made. And so before that, I'd like racked up my credit cards and a line of credit, and I had a consolidation loan. And then I'm stupid and didn't ever lower the limits on my credit cards, so I just went back to using them, as you do. And all of a sudden, I was maxed out. And by maxed out, literally, like I had $100 left on my credit limit and $100 in my checking account, and I had to make that last for 6 weeks. So I sort of had no other option but to pay off my debt. So I did that in 2 years, and that was kind of a journey in its own. And then after that is when I realized that while I was paying down debt, like I was so aggressive about it, but at the same time, I didn't really ever become a good saver. Like I had no good savings habits. And so my first year of being debt-free, I would write these budgets where I would say, like, I want to save 20% every month. This was sort of a number that I thought I can probably do that, because when I was paying off debt, like there were months where I was paying sometimes up to like 55% of my income towards debt repayment. Excuse me. And so I should have been able to save 20% no problem, but I couldn't, and realized like I just kind of like let lifestyle inflation creep in and all of that, and was just like having lots of fun. And and so I realized like I hated, because on my blog, like I write these budgets at the beginning of the month, and I say like I'm going to save 20%, then I would get to the end and be like, oh guys, I saved like 5. And I would come up with all these excuses for it, and they just weren't really good. And I also hated publishing them. Like I just felt so like stupid and bad that I like couldn't hit 20%, because based on my based on my income, it wasn't that much money. Like I should have been able to do it. And so like a year after becoming debt free is when I started the shopping ban and got rid of a bunch of my stuff, and sort of everything went from there.
That is sort of an interesting transition. And how drastic was it when you were sort of looking into minimalism? I assume it wasn't like all at once you just burned half your stuff. Sort of was it like, oh, I don't need a little of this, and now I don't need a lot of that, or sort of how did you come to this realization that life could be better for many, many reasons, making it simpler, I guess? Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, I feel like when I started it, it sort of was because I realized, like I was spending a lot of money just on useless stuff, like, and it wasn't, not even totally useless. I would just, be one of those people, like when I went shopping to Walmart, you go pick up the usual list of things, but then you see like other things, and you throw them in, and there's $5 here and $10 and $15 here, and so I'd just like look around and be like, I have like 6 bottles of lotion, or like 4 bottles of shampoo, or just stuff like that. I'm like, that's like a 3-year supply of lotion. Like that's like, you do not need to buy more once you get to a certain point. You just don't. So I'm looking at all this stuff being like, I physically don't need more. But that there was a lot of stuff like a couple years before I started it, I had actually moved 5 times in 1 year. And during that time, I didn't get rid of anything for some reason. So I literally would just like pack all my things in these same boxes, move them to the next place, unpack everything. Like 3 months later, pack them all back up, and I kept everything. Yeah, I didn't really like know that I was going to kind of have revelations as I was eventually doing this. I really just started it because I realized I had enough. But I don't know. I think sort of like the debt repayment, like once I start something, I am pretty aggressive about it. So when you're like, oh, did you like burn up half your things? I'm like, well, actually, like in a month, I got rid of over 40% of my stuff. So I sort of did do it all right away. But in doing it, and yeah, it was regressive. I like would basically, so I started like in my bedroom, and I would like empty the closet, the dressers, like every single drawer, and I basically threw everything all over the bed, and I could only put back what I was keeping, and then everything I wasn't went right into a bag to go away.
So how many times have you wished for something that you threw out in the last like year or however long since you had that sort of month-long epiphany? How many times have you wanted that 40% of stuff?
Never. I don't even know what any of it was.
Not even once?
No.
That's pretty amazing.
Yeah, and I just think that it shows you how much stuff you use or don't use, like on a daily or weekly or even monthly basis that's in your home, right? Like, yeah, I just don't remember what any of it was. I literally had boxes in my closet, right? Like that I just kept moving from place to place, but like I wouldn't even do anything with whatever was inside of it, right? And sometimes it's stuff like, you know, your yearbooks or whatever, and I'm like, I've kept those, and I kept some things, but no, I've never, I don't know, I was aggressive, but I've never missed any of it. And there's actually like the blog The Minimalist, they have a great trick, and I didn't use it when I was doing this, but now when I talk to other people about it, I always suggest it. Like their thought, they call it the 20-20 rule for like those just-in-case items that you're scared to get rid of. So like if you can buy it for $20 or less, and within 20 minutes from your home, get rid of it. And that's not really to condone spending, because like we shouldn't condone people go spend a lot of money, but it's like I've never missed any of them, so I've never spent that $20.
No, but it's a good way to give people who are kind of scared of even the word minimalism, if they're not going to do it because they're never going to really let go of something, giving them sort of an easy rule to follow. They may never end up, in your life that you're not going to miss those things.
Yeah.
And you can give them the confidence to do it knowing that they probably won't use that rule anyway. I think that's really cool.
Well, because most of the just-in-case items that I've talked to other people about, it ends up being something like, oh, well, I have this cord, like an HDMI cable, or like something like that. I'm like, okay, well, you can go to a Superstore and get one for $5. Like,
yeah, I'm going to be honest. Every guy I know, myself included, has that cord box.
Oh, yeah.
We get cords from every electronic device we've ever owned. We put it in a box, and we refuse to throw it out, and it gets tucked away in our closet next to our baseball card collection. 1991 Donruss baseball cards. Every guy my age has one, and we refuse to part with them.
Yeah.
I actually did part with mine. I'd just like to say I'm kind of on a very similar journey towards minimalism,
cool.
And I got rid of a whole bunch of stuff that had incredible meaning to me that I have no idea what it is. But it's gone, and I'm so happy.
Do you know what I love most, Cait? Actually, it was a very recent post of yours. I think it was even yesterday. You were talking about how you used to have on your list of things to do every day, I'm going to clean. I'm going to clean. And what you meant was, I'm going to put things away, and I'm not going to, like, it's not scrubbing or anything. It's just I'm putting things away. And now you don't have to have that on your list because everything that you have so few things that are actually useful, like you just put them in the place that they belong all the time. I love that. Oh, I love it so much. I can't even begin to express it.
Well, and that's just the thing, like, so it's like I was saying, like, minimalism sort of started as this thing about the stuff, like it had just to do with stuff, and, you know, I have too much of it and I should get rid of some of it, and then I got rid of like 40%, and then over the course of a full year, I got rid of 75% of my stuff. And the reason I was able to do that, because every month I would kind of look around and be like, I haven't touched that yet. I still haven't touched that. I haven't touched that. So it's all stuff related. And now that it's all gone, the biggest, well, I mean, there's a bunch of things, but one of the biggest benefits of it has been how much time I get back, right? And it's not just the time of like, oh, I don't clean anymore. Like you have to clean your bathroom and you have to clean your kitchen. That I don't have to tidy up, we'll say. But it's like there's so much time that we don't even, and like mental space that is taken up when you have clutter in your home, whether it's just thinking about like, you know, that you're going to have to clean it eventually, and you feel that constant dread of like, oh, like I don't want to, and you know you have to, and then aside from that, like how many things you might hold on to. Like I was really bad for buying books I thought I would read, but I really had no interest in reading them. But I was like, well, like a certain version of Cait should read this book, or like I want to be the kind of person who reads this book, right? And so I have all of them, and then I would look at them and I would just feel bad, right? And so it removes all of that stuff too, right? Like I don't look at my house anymore and see like that camera that I never pick up, and you feel bad about it, or like that craft or arts project or something, or you know some DIY project. I don't look around and see all that stuff because I'm never gonna do it. And so once I finally sort of let go of all that, and I was like, okay, no, this is who I am. All the rest can go, and just like I don't know, it's so much easier. So it frees up so much mental space and physical time that I don't have to like think or worry about stuff that I don't want to do.
So what's the entry point for people? Because I think we are very convinced that, because from our perspective of having already done it or having done something like it or being convinced in our own lives as part of our journey, but if you're telling somebody about the benefits of what you do and what your life is like, without them having that moment of feeling overwhelmed or, you know, the debt moment, any of those things, how do you convince somebody that you know needs to be convinced?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So one is, well, I usually say like start with a room, and I would even go further than that and just say like start with the room you do actually spend the most time in, and it might only be, I think they call them like invisible corners, which are like the corners where you kind of just shove everything and you don't you don't actually touch it ever and don't actually use whatever you put over there, and you kind of like pretend it doesn't exist, but it does, and every time you see it, you kind of get that shuddery feeling of. Anyway, so start with the room that you spend the most time in, and you know, go from there. But the other thing is, I'm trying to think of how to explain this. Basically, like removing, we all have little daily annoyances in our homes without realizing it. So for me, in my last place before I moved, it was that my desk area, like it was always really dark because I had it facing this window. I had a beautiful view in my last place, but it got really dark at night, and so I'd always be annoyed going to my desk at night because if I wanted to Skype with anyone, I didn't have a light, and it was super dark, and like it was just this annoying thing. For other people, it could be like, you know, when you're in your kitchen and every time you go to do this one thing, it's not where you think it should be, but you keep putting it back where it doesn't really make sense. So stuff like that, because for me, this whole thing started was because I couldn't find my can opener, and it was because I kept putting it in the stupidest spot. And so my brain just, like, I was always annoyed when I needed it and stuff like that. And the whole thing, like, then it started where I was, like, then in my kitchen pulling things out of drawers, being like, oh, my God, I don't want any of this. Like, it's all in the wrong spot, or I just need to get rid of it. So start paying attention to the little annoyances in your home. It could be super simple stuff, like every time you go to reach for a dish, you, like, think of going to a different cupboard and stuff like that. So, like, when you do try to fix those little things, see if there's something in that space that you can get rid of.
Oh. Oh man, I'm gonna go to my default comment, which is I really love that.
It is definitely, like, I know I was aggressive about it in the beginning, but now it is truly like, you know, just every month kind of looking around. I still get rid of stuff, like not a lot, but at Christmas or in November, I helped my dad get rid of quite a bit of stuff from his basement, and I was still able to like go back to my place and find, you know, 5 things that I didn't need, because I could look and be like, you know, I've been back in Victoria for 5-6 months now, and I've never used this thing, so I don't need it. The other thing, if anyone has kids, that I've heard is a really good one, but people could put it into practice for themselves too, is okay, so because it's really hard to get kids on board with getting rid of stuff, like especially young kids, because you got to think like the things that they own, it's all they have. Like kids are pretty crazy. Where when you ask them what they're grateful for, they'll throw out like the dog and this table, and like they'll throw out all kinds of weird things usually. But when it comes down to it, like what is in their bedroom is everything they own, and because they didn't even purchase it, like it was gifted to them, or they just, you know, like they're so scared to get rid of it. You can't say to a kid like, "Okay, let's get rid of all your toys." They're like, "What?" Like, you can't do that. So. One of the things I've read many times is to, like, when they're not there, if there's stuff you know they've outgrown,
steal it.
No, totally. But like when they're not there, is grab it and put it in a bag and then just put it in a closet for like 30 days, or even 60. And if they haven't asked for it in that period of time, then get rid of it.
Yeah.
So you can even do the same stuff with your own. Like if you're a little too nervous to get rid of some things, like box it all up for a couple months. That's actually another thing that one of the minimalists did. I think he called it a packing party, which is kind of funny. He called it a packing party. But his idea literally was he packaged every single item that he owned, other than probably like his toothbrush, and put it in a box. And I think he lived with like that for like 3 or 4 weeks. And anything he hadn't used in that 3 or 4 weeks, he got rid of. And like that's really aggressive. So like people don't have to do that. But the idea is interesting, right? Like put stuff away that you don't think that you're going to use, and if in a month you haven't used it, get rid of it.
Oh, yeah.
And so how successful do you think it's been for you? First of all, how long has it been since that first month? Okay.
So that was July 2014. It's like a year and a half or so.
Right. And so how successful, there's sort of two sides to it, right? It's been very mentally freeing for you, which you mentioned.
Mm-hmm.
Financially, how much do you think you can sort of directly or indirectly trace back to this mindset? Are you much more successful in meeting those monthly goals now?
Yeah, well, so I'm crazy, and at the same time of doing all this, I put myself on this 2-year shopping ban. Where like I still buy things, but it has to be something I really need, right? Like it has to be like my car battery is actually dead right now, and my car is like 7 years old, and it's somehow still on the original battery. So I've tried charging at my dad's. It's not going to work. I'm going to need to buy a new car battery. Those are things that you have to buy. So yeah, at the same time of doing that, I think what I really realized, both in getting rid of stuff and then not being able to bring more in, is like what I actually value in life. And so people read about it probably a lot on my blog, but especially last year, like I traveled a lot. Now when I was younger, like when I was in my early 20s, I used to talk about wanting to travel all the time, but I could never seem to make it happen. And now I'm like, it's been quite easy, and it's because I'm just not blowing little bits of money everywhere, right? So like I can very easily make travel part of my budget every single month, whether it's saving for a trip or going on one, because of that. And then, yeah, I would say, I mean, I went from saving, what did I say, like maybe 5%. Like I think the most I saved in a month that first year I was debt-free was 12%. And now, it sort of fluctuates now because since last summer I've been a full-time freelancer. But let's say now it's probably 25%.
Wow, that's impressive.
And the first year that I was doing this experiment, I had a full-time job, and so I had regular income, which made it a little bit easier to sort of figure all out. So that first year, I lived on 51% and then saved 31%, and I traveled with 18%. So I spent a lot of travel that year, and I'm not doing that this year. I'm not really doing any travel really this year. But yeah, so 25-30% of my income that I'm able to save now, and still spend a ton of money on travel, or at least last year.
Because you know what I love about this, and I love about your blog, is that it's not about not spending. It's about spending on the things that actually bring you fulfillment, meaning, real utility. I that's something that I think if we could, of course, here's my prescription for the whole world. If we could all just kind of focus in on the things that actually, and I think it's a period of time that you have to do it, of course, but you focus in on the things that are really, really important to you, and then it's not a matter of deprivation because you can't go buy that extra shirt that you don't really need. It's, I get to buy these things that are meaningful to me.
Yep. I think, number one, utility is a great word for it. Like, one of the things I think about a lot with minimalism stuff is when you look around your home, you should actually, like, your objects are supposed to be useful, right? Like, it's okay to have, like, a little bit of decorative stuff and stuff like that, but everything is meant to be used. So if you have all this stuff that's not being used, it's literally not serving its purpose, right? So if you donate it to something, maybe someone else can actually use it for what it's worth. So, yeah, no, like, I think minimalists in general, at least most of the conversations I have with people who identify as minimalists, like, they're quite happy to spend money. Like, I spend a lot of money on travel, but yeah, like that first year, like being totally honest, I think I spent around $10,000. I'm like, that's not like penny right? Like, but I had an amazing year, right? And And my living, I think the other thing that was important for me is, or like if we talk more money stuff, is I think one of the problems I used to have when I used to think about savings is I was like, you know, everyone tells you to save 10% or 20%, and I was like, I think we're actually doing it backwards. Like, I think the most important thing should actually be getting your living expenses to kind of a number that you average out every month over the year. So for me, I know it's about $2,300 a month. That some months it'll be like 26 or so, and then I had a crazy month a couple months ago where it was only like $1,800. So, but I know I need $2,300 a month-ish on average, and then everything else should be saved or spent on travel. But as long, like, excuse me. But yeah, so I think, and in doing that, I now, because I'm not just set on like, you know, when I get paid or every time I get money, I do put some of it aside right away. But then kind of all the time, like when I have extra money, I'm always shoveling it over to savings. So I'm like, I don't need this, I don't need this, I don't need this, and it just needs to go.
Yeah, I find I have a hard time like explaining to people sort of my views on money because they hear, you know, young and thrifty or blonde on a budget, these names, and they're like, oh, it's all about being cheap, or they're like, oh, my students are like, Mr. Prevo, did you see that deal that's on? And I'm like, yeah, like, do you need that though? Like, it's not really a deal, right? So it's not about being cheap; it's about getting utility out of your money. And why do I want to invest? I don't invest to keep score, as the billionaires say. I'm not billionaire status. And so, breaking news. And so it's not. It's just a matter of at some other point in my life living the lifestyle I want and putting my money where I value sort of that piece of life. But it's like a really hard concept to get across. It's either like you seem to either just be totally buying into the consumerism, you know, Steve Jobs tells you what you need mindset, or you're buying into the like, oh, don't buy anything, like just you know, live on the street, sort of extremism
for everything.
That these people, when they hear the word minimalism, they're like, oh yeah, they haven't bought clothes in 8 years, like.
But then the funny thing is, I'll say is like a minimalist will probably spend the most on clothes in the few items that they buy. Like, you know, like not everyone, but I know some who are like very happy to spend $200 on jeans because it's the one pair that they're going to wear for like a year, right? And they're not going to buy a pair that's $20. And I don't, well, certain items I'm on board with that and I'm not, but like I'll pay good money for a jacket, like a rain jacket that is very important in BC. It would be the same as like you guys, right? Like you have crazy like cold winters, so you need a solid jacket. So
I don't even want to think about it.
Is it snowing right now?
It's awful. It's really horrible.
I haven't actually looked because I'm so used to going to Toronto like every 2 months for work, and I haven't been out in a while. Haven't even looked.
That's probably wise. So, Cait, why don't you tell us a little bit about then what you're doing? I mean, I think your calendar, your planner for the year came from your own spending structure and infrastructure. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Oh, like mindful budgeting?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. No, it was like, so I first came out with it just as like a print product, so people can just download the PDFs and print them off once a month. And the idea really is like, I don't know, everyone always hears, or like when you read financial advice, you know, it's just like, oh, track your spending. But I felt like if I could actually create a sheet that made it really easy. Like sometimes you don't think about it. I worked in online learning for 5 years, and Kyle will know this too as a teacher. Like sometimes I don't know. Like I used to use a notebook for it, and it was a mess and whatever. But like not everyone works like that. Like they need some more structure, right? Like it's like getting a lesson plan. You need it actually laid out in front of you of what you're supposed to do. So I just thought, you know, if I can lay it out in template format, then that'll be the best way. But so really, it's just like tracking your spending every week and learning how to budget. But the biggest thing is at the end of every week and every month. So every week there are 3 questions to ask yourself. And it's really just making you reflect on the money that you spent in the week before. So some of it's like, you know, what's the best money you spent? Like how many times have you ever asked yourself that? Right? And like it could be anything. Like it could be like the $5 coffee that you took a girlfriend out for because you hadn't seen her in a month or whatever. Or it could be that I'm buying car battery tonight. You know, but like
now
how
you can drive, so that's a good thing.
This is wonderful. It could be anything, and asking yourself stuff like that every week, and then just like what do you want to work on and stuff like that. But asking yourself that every week, and just it doesn't take that long to answer it, but making yourself reflect on it, it just keeps putting back into you like, hey, what do I value and what am I okay spending money on, right? Like I used to hate when I was still in debt and paying it off. That was the first time I'd ever started tracking my spending, and I hated that 5 days a week I wrote down that I went to Starbucks. And now I will go out for coffee occasionally with a friend, but it's so crazy how the switch has happened that it's not that I'm like anti-Starbucks or anti-takeout coffee. I love if I treat myself, I love like a nice latte, but I actually like genuinely hate things like waiting in line, the drink maybe not being, full enough or taste the way you want it or whatever, and then you're like, oh, I wasted $5 on this. But it's mostly all the waiting. Even takeout, like going to restaurants and stuff, like there's a couple that I know because I have friends who own them, so I'm like, I know I'll always have a great time. But now, generally, I hate the like waiting in line just to sit down and then waiting for your food. And then the worst is like waiting for your bill to pay for the meal that you already waited and waited and waited for. But it's just interesting, like it's been a really like long-term change. None of this stuff happened overnight. But yeah, so for mindful budgeting, it's really going back and asking yourself every week what your value or what you value spending money on, and then at the end of every month, I have different questions that I'll ask them to check in on. But some of it could be like, maybe you've never done a shopping plan before, and maybe you don't want to, but like based on your last months of spending, what do you think you could cut out next month? And it could just be one thing, right? Like maybe it's just that you stop going to Walmart because you're picking too much extra stuff up, or it could be anything. But yeah, so it's just really making people more mindful of the decisions that they're making every day. The feedback from it has been fascinating because it was one of those things where I was like, this is just stuff I do without all the paper or like messy notebooks. Like this is just stuff I do. And then when people actually use it, like the feedback is crazy. I had one girl write a blog post on her own blog saying that her and her husband paid off $5,000 of debt last month just because they were more mindful of all that they were doing with their money. And I'm like, well, I don't know how much you make, but that's amazing. But even just little stuff, like I've never realized how much I was actually spending going to Tim Hortons every morning, or I've never realized this or that, and these other goals are more important to me. And so then they feel comfortable stopping it, because it's not about depriving yourself. It's like then they realize, like, you know what, I'd rather do this though, and so they don't want to do it anymore. And it comes so second nature to us, like we just, I know I don't value takeout coffee anymore, or like stuff like that, and so it's easy for me to get rid of, but it still took a long time for me to get there. So.
And I think that's a thing that people don't realize when they first have that epiphany that like, oh, I have to change and I need to do all these things, and I always feel like a really wet blanket sometimes, but I feel like I need to discourage people in order to encourage them later that, look, it's not going to be easy, it's going to take a long time, it's so worth it. But you really have to stick with actually paying attention and, to borrow a word, being mindful of what's happening while you do it. I think that's really great. Good.
Yeah, I know one time after I got done reading one of Cait's posts, I'm I guess sort of a naturally rural-born minimalist in that I've never had a major shopping center close by, so that part's good. But my one weakness is Amazon, and Amazon is awesome at getting you to buy stuff you sort of might want, or you might use them to project images of yourself, like you were saying, Cait. It's easy to collect books instead of read books. And there's a difference there. And so I am quite conscious about that now. I was like, no, before I buy anything from Amazon, and Amazon's terrible because they like email me, right? I always joke they know me better than I know me because they're emailing me. They're like, oh, your new author came out, and if you like that author, maybe there's this. And
I'm totally stuck in that trap right now, Kyle. Seriously, Steph and I have been doing a lot of canning, and we've got some plum preserves that we're going to make into fruit leather, and we needed some trays for our dehydrator. Apparently, there's special trays.
Okay.
Right.
I
looked on Amazon, and they're $40 for 2 trays. I'm like, I thought these would be like dollar store material. So I'm like, forget it. I'm not buying them on Amazon. And the next day on my Facebook feed, it's like, do you need trays? And I'm like, it's on my Facebook now. They're following me around.
We're having a sale on trays.
On them, and I'm like, wait a minute. They're $20. Like seriously, it's terrible. But yeah,
well, you just have to be aware of
and
that.
I just want to jump on it and spend. If you're an impulsive person, avoid Amazon.
Or just be aware, like whether it's keeping it in the cart for 48 hours, whatever sort of tips you want to use. Just be aware. Like all the studies show that if you think about thinking, so in other words, if you are cognizant of the fact that Amazon doesn't want you to think, you're going to be okay. Like a small amount of satisfying those impulses is okay, but just totally giving in, because Amazon, one-click shopping, it's perfect. It's the perfect modern way to overspend.
And a warning, I know I've put this out probably in season 1 because money. One-click shopping is one click. I had no idea. I loaded my shopping cart up with 9 different headphones. I was going to do comparisons after. I'm like, one click to buy. I clicked it, and it's like $384 on my credit card. I'm like, oh no! So I had Christmas presents for months.
Oh my gosh.
It happens. It happens. And it happens to me. So I avoid Amazon.
Well, that's the thing. I actually was never a big shopper, like in store. Amazon was it for me too. Like I would buy anytime I saw a book like mentioned that I was like, oh, I should read that. I would go on Amazon and put it in the shopping cart and then do whatever it took to get it up to $25 so you could get free shipping.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I did that constantly. I probably bought 4 to 6 books minimum every single month. And I can read that now, I'm proud to say, but like I never read that much back then, right? And so I was like, what was I doing? Like I'm just stockpiling books for like one day when they're never available. I have no idea.
The apocalypse.
The book apocalypse.
But you had an awesome book collection, which was the main idea.
So yeah, I got rid of some books too. I mean, I donated to the library. I didn't burn books or anything.
Start a fire in your backyard.
Yeah.
Well, before we ride off into the sunset, Cait, where can our audience find you if they want to learn more about minimalism and some of the resources you have and listen to your podcast?
Yeah, new podcast.
And you just got like you just like rocked like in the top however many in Canadian podcasts. Like
it's not like it's not like that every day, but it was wild. It was like number 5 in like the first few days, like in the business category or whatever.
Very, very cool. Well done.
Yeah, it was wild. Also, because we did all the things wrong. Like they tell you, like when you launch podcasts, have like X many episodes. Like also, Carrie and I didn't do any of that. I'm blondeonabudget.ca.com, Twitter, Instagram, always blonde on a budget. And then, Carrie Smith and I, who writes a blog called Careful Sense, we kind of just combined our brands and created a little podcast called Budgets and Sense. That's out now.
All right, cool. Well, stay warm out there, Canada, and we will catch you next week on the Because Money podcast.
Goodbye.